Okay, so when I say scaling, what do I mean? I have a belief and I assert that if you have a wonderful product or service, then you have an obligation, you have a responsibility to bring that to the world. You have a responsibility to ensure that as many people on this planet can avail of the value enabled by accessing your wonderful product or service. So that's my belief in the context of what scaling means. Technically, what it is, of course, is average annualized growth of 20% year on year, measured over a 3-year period on either revenue growth or employee growth. So it represents just less than a doubling of revenue or employee numbers over a 3-year period. That's the OECD definition. But ultimately, we're all about encouraging the incredible SME leaders who have these incredible products and services to bring these to the world, to bring these to a much wider audience. Sadly, less than 1% of small and medium-sized enterprises ever achieve scale. And I didn't realize that, coming to the second part of your question. Why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to us within Simple Scaling? Well, I spent, unbeknownst to myself, my entire career in scaling businesses. But scaling wasn't actually a word associated with business or used in the business lexicon when I go back. It's only in the last probably 10 years, really socialized by the work of the ScaleUp Institute, a body set up, a not-for-profit body set up in the UK by a lady called Sherry Coutu, who founded and started, scaled, and eventually sold through its listing on the stock exchange an incredible business called Interactive Investor. It's an investment platform for the retail investor. Valuation of a couple of $1 billion, I think. And Sherry went on to found the ScaleUp Institute because of her passion around SMEs and encouraging more SMEs to scale. My background, I qualified as a chartered accountant, didn't practice for that long, and my friends will tell me now that I'm all better. I've recovered from the accountancy piece, but yeah, so I went through Coopers and Lybrand and came out of that within months of qualifying, went straight into a software business back in the late 90s, early 2000s during the dot-com boom. I went in there as Group Financial Controller, this wonderful grand title in my 20s. Group Financial Controller
Impressive.
for EMEA, believe it or not. I didn't even know what the acronym EMEA was. And we scaled that business from a few people to over 100, with offices in Hong Kong and Boston and London. And as a 20-something, I was having a wonderful time. And like all good booms, there came a bust. And with that, I was invited to speak to this founder of a small engineering company based in Northern Ireland here in a small place called Cookstown. That had about 15 people at that stage, designing and manufacturing equipment primarily for the quarrying industry. 85% of the £3 million revenues that the company was realising at that stage came from Ireland. And this founder wanted to, and these weren't the words, but essentially scale the business, but didn't want to take on the all of the elements, the aspects of scaling a business that are required. He was passionate about product development, passionate about business development, but didn't want to get involved in all of the other bits in between. So I joined the business, became a shareholder of that business, became MD of the business in a number of years later, in 2007. And we scaled that from 15 people to almost 700 people. We established offices in 6 continents. We became number 1 globally for what we did, and scaled it to over 9 figures in revenue, to over £100 million in revenue, exporting to more than 100 countries. And I just thought that's what you did. So I sold my shares at an opportunity to do that back in 2019. And then a little bit like yourself, I suspect, started to reflect on what it is that I want to do in the next chapter of my life. And through various conversations with different people, I began to go down the rabbit hole of the SME landscape. There's a wonderful ecosystem for startups. There's, the larger corporates, and certainly the big seven, get too much probably of the headlines. But the SME community are this kind of this forgotten middle that represents 99% of companies by volume out there, and more than 70% of people in the workforce work for SMEs. And what I discovered was that actually less than 1% of small to medium-sized enterprises ever achieve scale. Just to give you some stats, Paul, on the importance of why, can we just not leave these SMEs alone? Let them just be. Why do we need them to scale? And scaling with purpose is an important part of this, in terms of not just scale. Growth for growth's sake, as Edward Abbey said, is the ideology of a cancer cell. This is scaling with purpose, ultimately seeking to do something good for those people that you serve, seeking to do something good for the planet ideally, and seeking to create a culture that ultimately develops those people that join you in executing the vision that you've set. So to bring this together, there are 5.7 million small and medium-sized enterprises in the UK. We don't have these stats for Ireland. There isn't a similar body to there's Scale Ireland, but we don't have the ScaleUp Institute as such a research body kind of monitoring the statistics in this. But if we take the UK as our closest example, 5.7 million small and medium-sized enterprises, they're contributing £2.3 trillion worth of revenue to the UK economy. 1.3 trillion of that is coming from a mere 28,000 SMEs, which are scale-ups. So 0.5% of the total SMEs are contributing more than 50% of the SME revenue. And what we wanted to do was actually turn the dial on that, and literally by encouraging tens, hundreds, thousands to scale, we could make an outsized impact, an outsized contribution to the communities that those SMEs operate within, to society, to economies at large. And I reflected on my time as CEO. I came from a finance background, as I mentioned at the outset. And whenever I came into the CEO role, I didn't go to CEO scaling school. I didn't go to CEO school. I didn't go to scaling school because it wasn't even a thing. And I had no handbook to scale a business. So a lot of what we were trying to do was making this up whilst speaking to people who had grown their companies significantly, reading a lot, and eventually, whenever the podcast platform and Medium came out, I became passionate about that, to listen to others who had been there and done it. So the passion around the book, which you mentioned, was the ambition to write the book that I wish I'd had back in 2007, to have this handbook for scaling. And I spent 2 years along with my co-founder Claire and co-author to discern what are the principles, the timeless principles that undergird every scaling success. So I had a strong sense of, from my own experience, of what they were, but wanted to validate my experience with others who had been there and done it. And we spoke to leaders like Mark Logan in Skyscanner, for example, who led that scale up. Leaders within Gymshark, which your listeners will know of, the athletic wear brand. Locally, Brendan Mooney, who scaled a business to, at its height, was worth a couple of $1 billion almost. So we created what we call our ScaleX 10 principle framework, and now coach the principles of scaling within our 12-month ScaleX Accelerator program. And post the program, then we have our graduates move into what we call our ScaleX Club. This is all aligned to our vision, to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose, anchored in our own purpose, to free leaders from business-limiting fears, to help them find the power of their own voice.
Wow. So there's so much in there. A few things jump out at me. One is that you have already successfully scaled a business yourself. So before you got into teaching and mentoring and doing your program, you had done it yourself. You'd walked the road, which I have a lot of respect for. But what you said something to the effect that you didn't know what scaling was. Nobody told you what scaling was. You didn't have the benefit of the book that you have written. You didn't have that, but you scaled an enormous business anyway. And I've been in business for 40 years. So I have a lot of respect for that because I know how difficult it is to scale a business. And I haven't achieved that level of scaling. So I'm wondering, to what degree is that in your nature to build something like that? And to what degree, in a lot of the SME owners, leaders you speak to, is it not in their nature? I mean, do you just have that innate? I'm not doubting the skill set. I'm just saying, to some degree, were you born with that innate ability that the guy who maybe gets his business to, I don't know what the average business you work with is, to $1 million or $2 million or something, just doesn't have that drive or ability? So is there some degree of innate talent or aptitude that's needed?
I would like to say yes, I'm quite exceptional, but no, I'm not, and I believe that.
Well, no, you are exceptional because what you did was exceptional.
What we did as a leadership team was exceptional. What was exceptional was that I arrived into this business at a time where the founder was someone who was passionate about growth. The other shareholder, and a wonderful guy, still very friendly, and we're still involved in a number of businesses, who led the business development at that point. He was also passionate about growth. I was passionate about growth. Scaling wasn't a word at that stage. We didn't talk about scaling. We talked about growing this business.
But you all wanted to grow this business.
We all wanted. That was the common anchor here. We wanted to grow this business, and then it was kind of, okay, well, we all want to grow it. So what does growth look like for you, Tony? And what does growth look like for you? Here's what growth looks like for me. So this was the beginnings of crafting a vision for the business. So within months of me coming to the CEO role, what I wanted to do was align us behind a common vision. And up until that point, we didn't have a vision. So what does great look like? I have a version of that. I have a view of that. So, in 5 years' time, if we come together and we're celebrating over a beer, what are we celebrating? What does it look like? How many countries have we exported in? How have we changed the industry? What are people saying about our brand? What does our culture feel like and look like? How many cars are parked in the car park? What are those cars? Are they high mark cars? Because everybody's doing so well. What does our office building look like? What does this look like? And as I'm saying this now, it puts the hairs in the back of my neck, because by the time we had finished, by the time I'd left, arriving initially into this small office in Ballyrea Industrial Estate in a business park, when I retired from the business, we had 40,000 square feet of world-class offices that would not look out of place in Silicon Valley. Just the offices. What we wanted to do was create a world-class campus dedicated to wet processing solutions. We had just acquired the Caterpillar factory, which was 300,000 square feet, which was 10 times bigger than 15 times bigger than the very first factory we ever built, which was back in 2007, 20,000 square foot. We had offices across the 6 continents. And this all came from this collective will, this collective desire to grow and challenge ourselves, challenge the industry, align behind this vision, create an incredible culture where people would would come from all over the world to actually work here in Cookstown, and we achieved that. And I have to say, I'm really fortunate to have arrived at a point in my career where I happened upon a number of people who were similarly desirous of growing themselves, growing the team, and ultimately growing the organization to challenge an industry.
I certainly can hear the passion in your voice for it still, which is great, because I suppose now what you're doing is passing that passion on to others. So as I understand it, your target audience, so the people you're speaking to, are SME business owners. The typical business, what does the typical SME client of yours look like? How small are they? I mean, at what point in time is someone the perfect fit to come onto your program?
So the entry level, where we pick them up, is a minimum revenue of £750,000,
Okay.
about €1 million, let's call it.
Okay.
And we have an online platform called ScaleX Elevate to allow them to access a self-paced learning journey, a community of like-minded people, and support them in their scaling journey. For those who come into our in-person 12-month accelerator, which is much more intensive, they will be typically realizing £2 million, right up to 50, 60, 70 million pounds. We've one company this year at £100 million revenues, a more traditional industry, and everything in between. But the threshold is typically to come into our in-person 12-month program is £2 million. Now, what I believe is that if you've sold £1 million of anything, if you've exchanged £1 million of value, where people have written checks or bank transferred or given you cash for your services to the tune of £1 million, then you have something of value. There's been a significant value exchange there. You don't get that, or that isn't confirmed at, let's say, £20,000 or £50,000, even £100,000. But if you reach £1 million, you have definitely delivered value to those who have received your products or services. What we believe in Simple Scaling, is that if you've delivered £1 million worth of value, why are you not delivering £10 million worth of value? If you've delivered £10 million worth of value, why are you not delivering £100 million worth of value? And sometimes, because my background's in finance, we can get caught up in the revenue numbers. But for those listening, convert those revenue numbers into those customers, those clients, those recipients of your products or services. The impact, the number of people you're impacting. The revenue is just a byproduct of the value exchange. The more value you put out in the world, the more people you impact, and ultimately the revenue that you earn is an echo of that value. Sometimes we get caught up in the P&L and the numbers, but that's just a byproduct. And that's me saying that as a background as a chartered accountant. But when you focus on impact, and this is what we want to do, ultimately, if you have leaders who have a desire to scale with purpose, to scale consciously, to examine themselves, their leadership style, the environment that they're creating, the context of the culture, the products or services that they're creating, the benefit and value that they're bringing, then ultimately, I have 3 kids. I want my kids, who are 21, 19, and 16, if they're going into the workplace, to join environments like that. Environments where there's a desire at the top to scale with purpose, so the leader is challenging themselves. They're positively challenging their teams to grow, and ultimately the organization grows as a result. And the outcome of all of that is more people are positively impacted because you're putting your product or service in more people's hands.